This detective series introducing us to the world of Detective Sam Spade, who lost his ex-partner, Bridget O'Shaughnessy, in Istanbul. Spade had been given the responsibility to take O'Shaughnessy's young daughter, Teresa, and hand her over to Philippe, who was Teresa's biological father. However, things didn't go as planned, and eventually, Spade fell in love with the quaint French village of Beauzels, until one day he had to look into a horrific murder scene that was connected with Philippe and Spade's past. After an accident in Istanbul claimed Bridget O'Shaughnessy's life, Sam Spade came to a French village named Beauzels to hand Teresa over to her family, which consisted of Teresa's father, Philippe, and grandmother, Audrey. But Audrey wasn't very happy to see Teresa and expressed her joy for O'Shaughnessy's death. However, she also told Spade that her son, Philippe, who wasn't in the village anymore, had made a great mistake by marrying Bridget, and now neither of them wanted to take responsibility for the child. Spade didn't irritate them any further and decided to take care of Teresa until she became an adult. He enrolled Teresa in a convent where she was under the supervision of the Mother Superior. Spade used to visit regularly, but with time the frequency of his visits dropped off. Spade fell in love with a local woman from the village. Her name was Gabrielle, but even though they fell in love and got hastily married, Gabrielle couldn't give Spade a long-term, blissful married life. After Gabrielle passed away, a widower Samuel Spade spent 8 years in Beauzels, as he not only fell in love with Gabrielle, but was also in love with this village. Spade started an affair with local pub owner Jean-Pierre Devereux's wife, Margarita. However, Jean-Pierre knew about this affair, and he wasn't much bothered about it. Spade was repeatedly warned by the chief of police, Petrus, to stay away from any commotion, as he didn't want Spade to stir up any trouble in this village. Spade had quite a history of being a dangerous man who wasn't very social or easygoing. Therefore, Petrus was quite intimidated by Spade from the start. In the meantime, Spade was diagnosed with emphysema, which would slowly kill him if he didn't quit smoking right away. At this point in his life, Spade seemed to have a life least affected by worries, but emphysema caused him to stress over his own life. He quit smoking only outside of the house, as whenever people used to offer him cigarettes, he refused to smoke. But during the sleepless nights at home, he was seen taking a puff or two. In the interim, a rumor of Philippe coming back was spread in the village. One night, Spade even received a call from Philippe, whose vengeful voice caused him to worry. Philippe had always been vengeful towards Spade, not only because Spade was in love with Bridget. When Gabrielle was alive and being blackmailed by Philippe, Spade intervened and managed to get Philippe sent off to the war. Philippe never wanted to participate in the war, but he had to because of Spade. Therefore, if he were returning to the village, it would be to take revenge on Sam Spade. Meanwhile, Teresa seemed to be a little suspicious. She knew that Spade loved her like his own daughter, but deep in her heart, she somehow wanted to reconnect with Philippe. Philippe, however, never showed genuine care and affection for his daughter, and as we've already seen, Philippe's mother, Audrey, was also a heartless woman who didn't care about Teresa's existence. But Bridget seemed to have amassed wealth for her daughter during the time when she used to work in Istanbul. Given that Spade had always loved Bridget, he was committed to his role as a father figure in Teresa's life and wanted to give her the guidance and support that Teresa deserved. Teresa was grateful to Spade, and even all the nuns in the convent were fond of Spade, but she also craved Philippe's attention in her life. When Philippe made the call, Spade heard a gunshot from the other side, and he quickly thought of Teresa's safety. As he contacted Petrus, the policeman once again warned Spade not to look for Philippe or try to get into trouble with him. Sam Spade would never listen to Petrus, as he was gravely concerned for Teresa. However, that night, Teresa came back home to Sam Spade, who saw that her clothes were stained by blood. Teresa told him that while she was in the convent, Philippe had visited her, but he was wounded by a gunshot. Sam realized that Philippe had also put Teresa's life in danger, so he decided to look into the matter. Teresa talked about a hooded man who was seen earlier in this episode, interrupting a conversation between Petrus and Spade. However, Teresa's statement seemed to be very sketchy, as it seemed likely she was hiding something that she had witnessed in the convent. Without wasting time, Spade hurried to the convent and found that some kids were locked up inside a room. He talked to the kids, who mentioned that Teresa might have the keys to the room. So if Teresa had the keys, why didn't she let the children go? To answer that, we may say that Teresa was trying to save her father's neck by withholding something crucial she had witnessed at the scene. However, Spade didn't question Teresa yet and headed to the prayer hall, where he was startled to find that all 6 nuns, including Mother Superior, had been shot in the head. They must have been killed by either Philippe or that hooded man. Or possibly that hooded man was Philippe, but we have yet to know that. As the mystery thickens in the upcoming episodes, more clues will surface. We'll soon come to know if Philippe is really back in town and killing people, or if there was something more sinister to the story. After the incident, Teresa went away from the house as she was clearly traumatized. She knew something about the murders of the nuns, but she was not telling anybody. Spade found her and asked her to come back home. One thing that we realized in this episode was that Teresa was not threatened by her father. Probably she didn't want to live with him, but she was not averse to meeting him, something that we couldn't speculate in the previous episode. Philippe came wounded to meet Teresa, and Spade knew that there was something more to the entire issue. Spade and Teresa were going in his Rolls Royce when suddenly someone shot at them from behind. The guy missed his shot and Spade started to chase him. Patris Michaud came to investigate the matter, but he too wasn't able to find anything noteworthy. Spade knew for sure that he was not the target of the shooter. He knew that the shooter wanted to kill Teresa, and that was why he asked her what she was hiding from him. But Teresa wasn't ready to speak, and she was just trying to avoid the topic altogether. Meanwhile, George, Spade's neighbor, called his mother over to his place. Both of them wanted to see a painting that Spade had in his house, and he called them inside to take a look at it. Spade got to know that George's mother knew Philippe from before, and she had a very different perception of him. Spade was surprised, and he double-checked with her to see if they were both talking about the same guy. George's mother told Spade that Philippe had paid a generous amount for a painting that he wanted. Spade was surprised, as he didn't think that Philippe was someone who was interested in art. Jean-Pierre, as we saw in the first episode, was jealous of Spade, and he knew that something was happening between him and his wife, Margarita Devious. Margarita told him time and again that she didn't have anything to do with Spade, but her husband didn't believe her even for a moment. Jean didn't have any money, and he had to toil hard to make a living. He wanted to repair things with Margarita, but he knew that it was not such an easy task. We got to know in the second episode of Monsieur Spade that Jean-Pierre wanted to inherit a piece of land that earlier belonged to Gabrielle. Margarita told him that it was the law that after the death of one's wife, the husband inherited her entire property, and so it was not Spade's fault that he had everything under his name. But Jean-Pierre's point was different. He said that he worked in that vineyard, and he should have gotten the title to that land. I personally understand why Jean-Pierre was in such an insecure space. Spade's personality did make others around him feel small. Margarita was quite evidently attracted to him, and probably nothing would have ever happened between them, but Jean-Pierre still saw how she looked at him. Jean-Pierre wanted to repair things with Margarita. He wanted to tell her how much he loved her, and he was not ready to accept the fact that they wouldn't be able to bring back that last spark. At the end, Teresa finally revealed what had happened on that fateful night. She said that her father brought a kid with him named Zaid. Probably, Philippe was having an affair with a nun named Angelique. Philippe had come to meet her only, but after he got shot, his plan changed. He wanted to protect the kid, so he asked Teresa to hide him somewhere. Teresa went upstairs and did what she was asked to. That's when she heard the first gunshot. She came running down, and she saw that all the children were scared, as somebody had broken into the chapel and had a weapon with him. Teresa hid the other kids and then went to the chapel to see what was happening. There was a monk who had come looking for that same kid. He asked the nuns one by one, and when they didn't tell, he killed them by shooting them point blank. The monk saw Teresa too, and he came for her. Teresa had a sharp knife with her, and she stabbed the monk with it and escaped from there. She went upstairs, but she was not able to find the kid there. Teresa somehow managed to make it near escape, and probably later, the shooter was sent by the same monk to kill her. During the ending, we saw that the kid Zaid was still alive. He was at Samir's house, and he was evidently scared. When the monk was just about to kill Angelique, she said something that complicated the matter even more. She said, "Mahdi awaits you." A Mahdi is like a messiah or a leader who assumes the role of one. Spade knew that there was some detail he was missing out on, and there were things happening that he had no clue about. We don't know as of now why that kid was so important and why the monk was after his life. In the subsequent episodes, we would get to know what kind of trouble Philippe was in and what that monk wanted to achieve. Jean-Pierre wanted to leave Bouzelles, as he had realized that no matter what Marguerite said, in reality, she didn't love him. Spade was relieved that she was trying to mend the bond and find a way to once again come close to her husband, but Jean-Pierre told him that he was wrong in thinking so. Jean-Pierre wanted the vineyard, and he believed that he would be able to prove his point in court. Pierre was ready to file a suit and challenge the will that Gabrielle had left. He told Spade that they could settle the issue out of court if the latter agreed to pay him compensation. In the past, Pierre had stolen from Gabrielle, and Spade considered it one of the reasons why she didn't leave anything for him. Pierre accepted that he had stolen from the lady, but he still knew that it was not the reason she didn't leave the vineyard for him. Pierre's mother was a cook in an asylum where Gabrielle was admitted after the death of her husband. Pierre knew that Gabrielle had written her will during that phase, and that was why he was very sure that he would be able to prove in court that she was of an unsound mind and didn't know what she was doing. Pierre said that though his marriage couldn't be saved, he still wanted to look out for his wife. He said that he wanted to make sure that Marguerite's future was safe and secured. Pierre wanted to go to Algeria and start a new life there. Pierre had been reckless in the past, and probably that's why Spade didn't trust his intentions. Spade told him that he wouldn't give him anything, but I believe that in the future he would give him the vineyard. Spade was not a greedy man, and after this conversation with Pierre, he probably saw that whatever he was saying made sense. Spade, together with Chief of Police Patrice Michaud, went to meet Monsignor Clement, Vicar General of the diocese. They met an American priest named Father Morgan, who had come to investigate the matter. The monk had been found, and the church wanted to conduct an internal trial on him, as apparently he was a man of God, and they felt that he shouldn't be tried by normal courts. Patrice was furious, as he wanted the madman to pay for his sins. Patrice had seen how brutally he had killed the nuns, and he was of the opinion that he deserved the maximum sentence. But the decision had been made, and the monk was being extradited to the Vatican. Patrice told Clement that he would not stop investigating the matter, and that he would make sure that the government stopped the extradition. But Spade and even Patrice knew that it was a lost cause because the French authorities wouldn't interfere in the affairs of the church. It became very clear in Monsieur Spade episode 3 that the church was worried about its reputation, and they wanted to suppress the matter. At the end of the negotiation, Father Morgan came out and told Spade that the monk's name was Friar Angelo, and that he was part of a secret society called the Agnus Omnipotens. Spade and Patrice were shocked when they learned about it. They knew that there was more to the case than met the eye. They didn't know why that kid was so important, but they knew that religion had to play a key role in it. The monk wasn't chasing the kid due to some personal vendetta, and it had everything to do with the beliefs of the secret society. As we saw in the previous episode of Monsieur Spade, the kid named Zaid had been found by Samir, and he took him to his home. Samir's friends and family got worried as they knew that the police could come searching for him. Samir thought that it would be best if they spoke to the imam and asked him to keep the kid with him. Samir noticed that though the clothes that the kid was wearing were dirty, they were expensive. He knew that he came from a wealthy family and that a lot of people wanted to kill him. The kid was sacred, and the gun he had on him belonged to the French army. The imam came, and he told Samir that there was a probability that the kid was Mahdi, the chosen one. We had seen in the previous episode that the dying nun had also said the same thing, after which Spade had come to know that the case was not as simple as it seemed, and the stakes were very high. The French intelligence agencies also wanted the kid, and Teresa told Spade that her father, Philippe, was getting paid to take care of him, though she also didn't know who was paying him. The imam told Samir that probably the French authorities would have taken the kid because they wanted leverage. The imam said that the French intelligence agency STC was constantly tracking his movements, so he wouldn't be able to take the kid with him. The kid didn't speak, probably because he was too scared or traumatized, and Samir and the imam knew that a lot of things would get clear if he gave them some information. At the end, we saw that Samuel Spade asked his doctor to tell Saint Audrey that Teresa had been shot a couple of days ago. Spade knew that she would pass on the information to Philippe, and then he would contact him. Spade's plan worked, and Philippe did give him a call and told him that he had no role to play in the scheme of things. Philippe asked Samuel Spade to meet him at the cemetery, but when the latter reached there at the specified time, he wasn't able to find anybody. He came back to his home as he was under the impression that Philippe possibly wanted to deceive him and come home to meet Teresa. At that moment, somebody broke into the house, and before Spade could do anything, he was attacked by the trespasser. Episode ended on a cliffhanger where we heard a gunshot. We got to know that Henry, who pretended to be a painter, was probably working for their intelligence agencies, and he was there for a reason. He had bugged Spade's house, and he heard every conversation he had with the people there. It was a shocking revelation, as it meant that the French authorities were keeping track of what Spade was up to. In a flashback sequence, we saw how Gabriella killed her husband, Jacques. Gabriella was supposed to leave for Argentina with him, but when he came to take her, she, together with others who probably belonged to the law enforcement authorities and intelligence agencies, shot Jacques. Gabriella asked him how he could betray everything he stood for at one point in his life. Jacques probably betrayed the trust of his people, and though it is not told what he did, I personally believe it had something to do with the far-right organization that was now after the kid, Zaid. We saw that Henry came at just the right moment and knocked down the intruder. Spade was surprised that Henry was present so late at night. Henry told him that he was just keeping an eye on Teresa, as he had asked him to, but Spade was not so naive as to believe that. The soldier who broke into Spade's house worked in ecstasy, and he had come looking for Philippe. He was ordered to bring Teresa in case he didn't find Philippe there, as Army intelligence wanted to know what happened to the kid. Spade got to know that Philippe was asked to take Zaid with him to Paris, but he went rogue. The far-right organization called Army Secrete also wanted the boy, and Philippe was given the job of hunting them down. Philippe had killed 30 men of the extremist organization, and since then, they have been on the lookout for him. Spade got to know that Henry was a sub-lieutenant after the dead body of one of the soldiers who broke into the house the night before was recovered from the pool. Someone had shot the man, and Henry told Patrice that he was not behind it. It could have been possible that George and Cynthia were behind it since, in the last episode, we got to know that they too were undercover agents and not art enthusiasts as they pretended to be. Spade knew that Henry was placed there because his seniors knew that someone would try to break into the house and take Teresa with them. He told him to not keep him in the dark the next time and not spy on him. Henry was about to leave when Teresa stopped him. She was attracted to him from the time she first saw him. Henry told Teresa that her father Philippe was hired by the army to kill the members of the Army Secrete. The organization was angry at President Charles de Gaulle for giving Algeria away, and they wanted it to be a part of France. In 1962, after a lot of struggle, Algeria declared itself an independent nation, and the president decided that it was in everybody's best interests. Now, a few soldiers from the army didn't like that decision, and they decided to form a separate organization so that they could join forces and carry out their agendas. It came as a bit of a shock to Teresa when she got to know that her father used to kill people. She shared an intimate moment with Henry and went to meet her grandmother. Teresa was well aware of her grandmother's intentions, and she knew that she had every right to be mad at her. We got to know that the man who was asking Marguerite to meet somebody was Chastien, and he was sent there by Jean-Pierre's father, Denis. Marguerite finally gave in, and she went to meet the man. Denis and Margarita probably had an affair back in the day, and then Jean-Pierre came in between and married her. Denis was responsible for ruining Jean-Pierre's life, and now he regretted the fact that he didn't leave anything for his wife or his son. Jean-Pierre hadn't talked to him for years, though back in the day, when he was in prison, Marguerite had contacted Denis and asked him to help his son. Marguerite read the letters that Jean-Pierre used to send to Denis, as the man wanted to know what his son felt. Jean-Pierre got really mad at Marguerite for doing so, and he felt as if his privacy was being violated. Jean-Pierre revealed to Marguerite that he was not discharged because of his father, but because of another person with whom he made a deal. The look on Pierre's face told us that the individual he was referring to was not really a good person. Jean-Pierre in the end met Samir and got to know about Zaid. He made a phone call and a man came to take Zaid. Though his identity wasn't revealed, I believe he was either from a far-right organization or from Army intelligence. Though Spade wanted to stay out of the mess, I don't believe he would get that privilege, and soon he would be dragged even deeper. In the upcoming episodes, we would get to know what happened to Zaid and if Spade was able to find Philippe. Monsieur Spade, since the previous episode, knew that something was really off about George and Cynthia, and they were not the people they pretended to be. He had gone to their house with Patrice, and when he reached the garage, Cynthia all of a sudden came and reacted in a very suspicious manner. Spade knew that there was something behind those locked doors that she didn't want him to see. Spade entered his house and he heard a ticking noise, which made him realize that there was something hidden behind the painting that was hanging on the wall. He brought it down and he discovered that a microphone was planted in it. He found the second microphone in another painting, and he knew that it was the work of George and Cynthia. He pretended to call Patrice, said that he knew where Zaid was, and asked him to reach the address as soon as he could. He did that because he knew that the moment George and Cynthia would hear him talk, they would leave for that location, and then he would get the time to search their house. As soon as he heard the car getting started, he broke the garage lock and found out that his speculations were right. George and Cynthia were part of the British intelligence agency MI6, and they had been spying on Monsieur Spade for quite a few days now. Spade was just seeing everything when George arrived out of nowhere, and both men exchanged glances as if they were going to put a bullet in each other's heads. George assaulted Spade, and that's when the latter got to know how deceptive looks could be. George told Spade that he was just acting like this timid guy, But in reality, he could really harm him if he wanted to. Cynthia also arrived at the scene, and they asked Spade to have tea with them so that they could reveal to him what they learned about Zaid after years of research work. Cynthia and George told Spade that they were actually spying on Teresa because of her close proximity to Philippe Saint-André. Spade told them that she didn't know anything and to leave her out of the mess, but George said that their organization believed that she was the key to finding Zaid. George told Spade that Zaid was first living with a very wealthy Egyptian family when his nanny took him with her and disappeared. That nanny's name was Ghazala, who was apparently the sister of Angelique and also a very high-ranking officer in the National Liberation Front, which was an Algerian political party that fought for the independence of the nation. They both looked alike, and that's why, a lot of times, people mistook them for each other. Ghazala was the only person who knew what Zaid looked like in real life, as nobody else had ever seen him. According to George's speculation, Philippe Saint-André knew that he needed Ghazala to be with him, as any potential buyer wanted proof of Zaid's identity, and only Ghazala could give them that. Finally, it was revealed why the entire world was after Zaid. George said that Zaid was a gifted child, and at such a tender age, he could miraculously break any code in the world. We saw how Zaid had a habit of scribbling on the walls, and that was not all gibberish that he wrote. Each and every intelligence agency wanted Zaid to be in their custody, and even the Vatican wanted to get hold of him as they believed that he could mathematically prove the existence of God. George and Cynthia were also there for the same reason, and they told Spade that no matter where the boy went, nobody was going to let him live in peace. He said that the best bet for Zaid was to be at a place where his life was not in jeopardy, and the British government was ready to give him immunity. George and Cynthia were not going to let Spade go. But Teresa arrived just at the right moment, and Spade escaped with her. Zaid was with Philippe Saint-André and Ghazala, and Jean-Pierre started to feel guilty because he didn't know what kind of people the boy would be sold to. At the beginning of Monsieur Spade, Claude saw Ghazala, and he mistook her for Sister Angelique. Ghazala assaulted the man because she didn't want him to follow her. Claude went and told Teresa and Spade about the incident, and that's when Spade went to check if they were actually there or not. Spade went till the door, but just then, something snapped inside him, and he came down without entering the house. Spade probably didn't want to meddle in matters that did not concern him. He knew how dangerous these people were and what they were capable of doing. Jean-Pierre was a troubled man, and he just couldn't control his emotions. The war had affected him, and he could never fully recover from his past traumas. He felt apologetic for everything he had ruined in his life, but he just couldn't make amends. When he was leaving home, he kissed goodbye to his wife, and the way he did it made it very clear that he knew that he wouldn't come back alive. Jean-Pierre went to check on Zaid even after Philippe had told him not to come looking for them. Jean-Pierre had already made up his mind that if he felt that something was not right, he would bring Zaid back, even if it meant that he would have to kill Philippe. But before Jean-Pierre could take out his gun, Philippe pushed him down the stairs and then shot him point blank. Teresa, for the first time, went to a bar with Spade. They went to Marguerite's place, where Spade allowed Teresa to have just one drink. Marguerite started talking to Spade, and she told him that she believed that Teresa wanted to stay with him, and though she never said it, she didn't feel happy when he left her in the convent. Marguerite was of the opinion that Spade had his calculations wrong, and in all probability, Teresa was his daughter and not Philippe's. Marguerite told Spade that Teresa's mother seemed like the kind of woman who could easily create a fake birth certificate and change the age of the baby. This speculation got him thinking, and deep down, he also knew that Teresa looked a bit older than her age. Probably in the subsequent episode, we will get to know the truth behind it. But till then, Spade would have to make sure that Teresa is safe, and more importantly, that he does not get drawn into the mess and puts his own life in jeopardy. In the final episode, we got to know that George was plotting behind Cynthia's back, and he was secretly meeting Ghazala all this while. They both loved each other, and they had planned to run away the next morning. It could be possible that George was feeding Ghazala all the information that he got from his superiors, which was why the FLN was always a step ahead of others on a lot of occasions. FLN was an Algerian organization, and they resorted to terrorism to fulfill their vendetta. Ghazala was staying with Philippe, and though he worked for the French army, he didn't harm Ghazala because he knew that she was the only person who could identify Zaid. It felt like in the previous episode of Monsieur Spade, Ghazala and Philippe were attracted towards each other, but the equation was not as simple as it seemed. Philippe might have liked Ghazal, but she was using him for her own benefit. She was going to run away with George, and probably she would have taken Zaid with her. But Cynthia realized that George was up to something, and that's when she started tracking his movements. Cynthia was working for the British intelligence agency, and she knew that in her line of work, these kinds of mistakes were not pardonable. Cynthia rammed her car into George, and she made sure that he met his end. She knew that the asset had been compromised, and she had no choice but to put him down. Mr. Con went to meet Spade, and he asked him if he knew where Philippe was. Mr. Con was basically working for the French intelligence, though he refrained from telling anybody who his master was. Henry was also serving in the army, but Teresa had stolen his book, and that's how she got to know that he was OAS, the terrorist organization that wanted to prevent Algeria from becoming an independent state. One more thing that we got to know was that the French intelligence agency had sent Philippe to Algeria to eliminate a high-ranking officer, but he met Ghazala during his stay there, and that's when he got distracted, to say the least. So it was decided that Mr. Con would give a huge sum of money to Ghazala and Philippe and take the boy with him. Mr. Con came to the place where he was told, but as soon as he opened the suitcase to show Ghazala that he had brought the money, Philippe shot him and killed him on the spot. Henry, who was also sitting on the terrace with his sniper, fired a few shots at Philippe, but he was not able to kill him. Amidst the chaos, the monk also arrived, but before he could do anything, Spade, Patris, and Philippe shot and killed him. The boy was taken into custody by Patris, and luckily, no harm came to him. Basically, from the church to the different intelligence agencies, everyone wanted the kid at any cost. They all knew that he could break codes, and they understood the kind of leverage they could get if they had his knowledge on their side. Spade went down memory lane and remembered the conversation he had with Gabriella, where she told him that she wanted to be left alone as she probably had a couple of months more to live. Gabriella told Spade that she didn't want to say goodbye and that one day, she would just disappear from Spade's life without telling him. Spade got really angry at the idea, as he was not ready to part ways, and it all didn't make sense to him. But Gabriella was very sure that this was how she was going to act, and she told Spade to remember all the good times they had spent together. Virginia Dell, a retired Lieutenant General of Canadian Special Forces, came to France, and she called everybody who was involved in the fiasco as she wanted to understand what they were up to. She wanted to know everybody's narrative and decide who was at fault. Virginia was the Secretary of the United Nations Peacetime Conflict Resolution Organization, and she told everybody that the kid was going with her. Virginia realized that everyone just wanted to serve their own vested interests, and nobody was looking out for the welfare of the kid. Spade had his doubts about the woman, and he knew that there were a lot of aspects of her professional life that she was not revealing. But Spade didn't care. He just wanted to get back to his normal life. His life had been turned upside down, even when he didn't want any kind of trouble. Spade got to know in the last episode that Teresa was his daughter, and not Philippe's, when she told him her age was 17 years. Probably in the future, they would mend their relationship, understand each other's perspective, and fill the void that existed in their respective lives. As far as Zaid is concerned, I don't think that the intelligence agencies of various countries are going to stop, and they will try to get custody of him through legal or illegal channels.